If you want to lose body fat, you actually need to extend the period of time that you're not eating. In other words, extend your fasting period and get rid of all the snacks in order for you to have enough time that your insulin is low. When insulin is low, it's going to allow fat burning, which is going to allow you to pull those calories back out.
You're cited as being really the founder of modern intermittent fasting. And I've heard people talk about intermittent fasting on this show over and over and over and over again now. But the internet says that it really came from you. I know that intermittent fasting has been happening for thousands of years, but the idea of it as a tool for weight loss, they say it came from you.
Because in 2013, 2014, really nobody was talking about it from a medical standpoint. Like, what's happening in the body? Why is it good? Why is it bad? And really, I was, for years, sort of this one voice in the wilderness that was saying, like, hey, this is a tool for us. If you want to lose weight because it's important, then you can just set aside a period of time that you don't eat. At the time, people thought it was extremely bad for you. And I looked through all the literature and I said, well, why is it bad for you? And they had all these reasons. There's all these myths about intermittent fasting and how it's going to cause you to gain weight and be tired and hungry and all these sorts of things. I said, well, no, there's actually a lot of data here over the last, 2,000 years that we've used intermittent fasting, and they're simply not true. And I can go over a few of those. But that's why there was nobody talking about it at the time. And that's where I started to sort of bring it into the sort of public consciousness that this is a tool. That's all it is.
Were you attacked for that at the time?
Oh, absolutely. Like I got attacked from all sides. I got, doctors were coming after me, dietitians were coming after me. Everybody thought I was going to do so much harm. And the funny part was that, as I think back, as I spoke to a lot of colleagues would say to me, you know what? I used to do that when I was in training. We did that all the time. We'd go 24 hours without eating because we're in the OR or we're in the ER or we were busy. So we did that constantly and nothing bad happened. And I remember thinking, you know what? As a doctor, I actually tell people to fast all the time. If you have to go for surgery, you need to fast. If you're after surgery, you need to fast. If you do fasting blood work, you need to fast. So why is it that I'm actually telling people to fast all the time, and yet for weight loss, you shouldn't fast? That doesn't make any sense. And physiologically, from a body standpoint, it doesn't make any sense. One of the things people talked about was, it's going to make you eat more later. It's going to make you more hungry. Your basal metabolic rate's going to go down. This was one of the big myths of intermittent fasting. That's going to cause the so-called starvation mode, right? And this is the idea that your basal metabolic rate will fall so low that when you do start to eat, you're going to gain weight again. So I said, well, let's think about this. You can do a study where you take somebody, say you, for example, and you could fast them for 4 days and measure how many calories they're burning, their basal metabolic rate on day 0 before the fast, and measure them 4 days into the fast and see how many calories you're burning. So on day 0, they say you're burning, say, 2,000 calories a day. On day 4 of 0 food, you don't eat any food for 4 days. They measure how much calories you're burning. Your body is burning 2,200 calories. Your basal metabolic rate didn't go down. It went up. Your body's activating itself during fasting, which is fascinating because if you're trying to lose weight, dropping that basal metabolic rate is death. Like, if you drop that metabolic rate, it's so hard to lose weight. That's what the calorie restricted diets did. That's what the low fat diets did, the eating all the time did. But when you actually fast, your metabolic rate went up. And we see this in study after study. And the reason is actually basic physiology. It's actually medical physiology, like first year medical school stuff. When you don't eat, what happens in your body from a hormone standpoint is that your insulin's going to fall. You're going to allow your body to start using the calories that are in the body. At the same time, other hormones go up. So the sympathetic tone goes up, which is your fight or flight response. Your cortisol levels go up because, again, it's an activation, and your growth hormone goes up because those hormones are going to start telling your body to start pulling calories out. So you're actually activating yourself. Think about it in the wild. If you see a hungry wolf, is that wolf just sort of, all like lethargic? No, he's activated. He's actually more dangerous than any other wolf, as opposed to, say, a lion who just ate. Because when you just eat, you just want to lie there. You want to digest your food. You have no energy. So people say, wow, your metabolic rate's going to go down if you fast. No, the truth is actually the opposite. It goes up.
You fast?
Oh, I do that regularly, yeah.
And what does your fast look like? Because I've heard of all these different types of fasting, 36 hours, 72 hours, 14 hours.
Yeah. There's no rules for fasting. You could do, it could be 16 hours. So 14 hours, remember, is sort of a baseline, 12 to 14 hours, right? That just means you're not eating after dinner. That's it. And so if you want to lose weight, that's probably not strong enough to make you lose weight, because 12 to 14 hours is sort of just this baseline that people had in the 70s. So you can go to 16 hours, for example, and you shrink that by either eating breakfast a little later or eating dinner a little earlier. But you can do more than that. You can do, say, a 24-hour fast. You could eat 2 meals a day, say eat between 12 and 6. That's a 6-hour eating window. Or you could eat once a day, which is like a 24-hour fast. Or you could even go multiple days without eating. Because again, your body is smart. Your body knows what to do. If you have all those calories sitting on your body, right, 100,000 calories sitting in body fat, and you don't eat for 3 days, well, you need 6,000 calories. Well, you have 100,000, 200,000. So what's the problem? Take it out of your body fat. Let your body eat your body fat. That's what fasting is doing for you. And it's totally natural, because that's what it's there for. That body fat is not there for looks. It's there for you as a source, as a store of calories. So fasting just lets you use that. There's nothing wrong with it.
Leptin is this hormone that essentially brings down my hunger, makes me less hungry. Yeah. Is it therefore possible that people are becoming leptin resistant?
There is leptin resistance. The question again is why? And the way to think about it is it's sort of this sort of balance, right? So insulin, if you give people insulin, like if you think about causes of obesity, what causes people to gain weight? Well, if I give you insulin, you'll gain weight. If I give me insulin, I'll gain weight. So insulin causes weight gain, whereas leptin will cause the opposite. So it's sort of this seesaw. Body fat is nothing more or less than a store of energy, right? And you only store energy when your body tells you. Our entire body runs on hormones, right? Nothing happens without the hormonal system being activated. So insulin is pushing us to gain weight, leptin is pushing us to lose weight. And what's happening is that one is sort of overcoming the other. Insulin is overcoming the leptin.
In the last 6 months, so many of the nutritionists I've spoken to have really impressed upon me that we are fiber deficient. And I'm wondering how that happened.
Well, I think it was part of the processing thing. So taking out fiber is a great way to make foods more appealing, if you will. So what happens is that if you take flour, for example, and you have a lot of fiber in it, then the digestion is slowed. So what you get is a slower rise. So you take flour and you put a lot of fiber in it. Well, instead of having this huge spike in insulin, what you're going to get is a much slower spike in insulin. When you have the huge spike in insulin, it basically overloads your system and it makes you feel, gives you this big hit. Sort of like if you have like cocaine, for example, it's turned into a very fine powder, then you snort it, so you get this massive sort of spike. Same thing with, carbohydrates. If you don't have any fiber, you pull all the fiber out by processing, you get this massive sort of unnatural spike, and your body says, oh, that's great. It tastes great. I really love it. And you get people who are sort of addicted to it because that big spike is then going to release dopamine. And dopamine is a pleasure hormone. So you eat, cookies or whatever, highly processed foods, you get this sort of pleasurable response. And that makes you crave it. If you have a lot of fiber, it acts almost sort of like an antidote to that carbohydrate because you're slowing down that release.
What foods are high in fiber?
Well, mostly unprocessed foods. So the things like beans, and if you're eating whole grains, for example, compared to others, then it's going to have a reduction in the speed of absorption. So it's, again, not about the calories necessarily, or even necessarily about the carbohydrates, because you're still eating the same amount of carbohydrate, but you're slowing down the speed at which is absorbed, which is going to change the instructions that you give your body. If you have a massive spike in glucose, you get this massive dopamine surge, right? And your body's like, yo, love it. Right?
What
Then the
about
next time you're like, okay, give me that refined carbohydrate.
what about protein? Because we tend to think of protein as something that, is super great for weight loss.
Yeah, protein is probably sort of it's not bad. I mean, the main thing is cutting down the carbohydrates, but in the obesity code, I really talk about cutting the processing down because proteins usually don't come as pure protein, right? In nature, you never find how you have like whey powder protein or whatever
Yeah.
you get. The only way you can do that is by processing the heck out of food to get some kind of pure protein. It doesn't exist in nature. Like it almost doesn't exist in nature. Maybe there's a few examples. But when you eat meat, you think, okay, there's a lot of protein, but that's actually a lot of fat in there too, right? If you eat anything else that has protein, it's rarely all protein. Very lean meats like chicken breast and stuff are going to be higher in protein, but there's still a lot of other stuff in there. And it's very rare that somebody will eat just all pure 100% protein. It tends to be hard to eat. Like the fat brings a lot of flavor and so on. So it's a bit of an unnatural way to eat. Sure, if you're to eat a lot of protein, it does spike insulin, so it does have some effect to gain weight, but it's actually a very inefficient macronutrient. That is, there's three macronutrients. There's carbohydrates, there's fat, and there's protein. Your body stores energy or calories in two ways. There's glucose, which is carbohydrate, and it stores it as body fat, which is fat, right? Protein is not a way for the body to store energy. So when you're eating a lot of protein, it's very difficult for it to turn it into a storage mechanism. So you eat glucose and you eat fat, you can store glucose and you can store fat, but you eat protein, but you don't really store it as a source of energy.
So if all foods then increase our insulin levels, I guess the best solution is to fast.
Fasting is certainly one way, but just changing the foods to other ones. Because if you look at the insulin release in processed foods versus unprocessed foods, there's a huge difference. So if you eat sort of highly refined foods like white bread, for example, then you're going to have a very different response in insulin compared to sort of a whole food. So unprocessed foods in general, your body knows how to handle. Like we've been eating them for thousands of years. But certainly anytime you eat, your insulin is going to go up. You're giving your body instructions to store energy. So the solution is to eat less often.
What if you do a juice fast?
Juice fast, of course, is not a real fast because you're taking a lot of sugars.
What do you think of juice fasting?
I'm generally, I think it's less effective than regular fasting, and it really depends on how much juice you take. If you take a lot of juice, you could easily get, thousands of calories plus a lot of sugar. If you do it, cucumber juice and stuff that's very low in sugar and kale juice, then it could be very, very healthy for you because there's vitamins and stuff there. So it all depends on how it's done.
We have a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who they're leaving it for. And the question that's been left for you is, what is your greatest gift to the world?
I think if I suppose it sounds very arrogant, but I really hope that my work helps people sort of reverse the type 2 diabetes, because that is really sort of one of the most close things that I deal with, because I deal with it professionally sort of every day, and helps break the stigma of, not just the stigma, but the understanding, stimulates more thinking about weight loss, how to lose weight, more than calories in, calories out. I mean, it's so sort of pie in the sky because, there's a whole, worldwide sort of institutionalized, fossilized almost, thinking around calories. It's all about calories sort of thing. So for me to upset, it seems ridiculous, but I hope that I can at least start that conversation to say, hey, let's think about these things. Let's think about the hormones. Let's think about reversing type 2 diabetes. Let's think about all getting together and helping each other to become so much healthier, not through drugs and not through more surgery and not with, weird and new things that you've never heard of, but with the tried and the true sort of oldest thinking that has been there, right? It's to me, I sometimes think about this and I get crazy. I like, why do I think I can even do that, right? It's just ridiculous. It's so much hubris, but I can only try, right? Because I see in my own practice how much good it's done for some people. So it drives me to say, I need to bring it to more people. I need to explain it to them. If they want to be helped, they will be helped. But if they don't want to understand this, okay, I'm not trying to force myself to do anything. But, that's what I hope my greatest gift will be. But at the same time, I sort of think that's just, you're crazy if you can think you can do that. But
well, it's the crazy ones that change the world, Dr. Jason. It's the crazy ones that change the world. And even with, your conversation around intermittent fasting has changed many, many lives that you'll never get to meet. I imagine many, many millions, because it's even brought the conversation to this show before you entered the room many, many months and months and months, and almost a year ago, people started talking on the show about intermittent fasting. And that's in many respects due to the work that you've done to further that conversation. And now your work continues to highlight the fact that type 2 diabetes is a reversible disease in many cases. And I think, again, that's going to save, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of lives over the coming decades and years.